Today we're reviewing AMD's RX 6600 XT video card. It is $380 starting price. This is supposed to be at MSRP, at least for this model. It's the PowerColor Fighter 6600 XT. This is a 32 CU card. It is Navi 23, so it is physically smaller as silicon than the previous Navi 21 dies for, say, the 6700 XT and so forth. And we're going to be reviewing it for value, performance, thermals, and most of the other stuff you'll need. But we're keeping this one kind of short because it's a fairly simple product to review and not for the best reasons. Before that, this video is brought to you by Arctic and the Liquid Freezer 2 line of liquid coolers, which tested among the best in our thermal charts for CPU coolers. The Arctic Liquid Freezer series has had continual advancement since our original review, with updates in the mounting kit, including an AMD offset bracket for better thermals, and a longer warranty. Arctic also has its MX5 thermal compound available on the market now if you need some thermal paste for your regular maintenance. Learn more at the links in the description below. First of all, if you want the brochure, the spec sheet, we already went through that in the announcement video for the 6600 XT. We'll link it below. You're welcome to check it out. We're not going to go through all that again. The die size is significantly cut down. That means that AMD can put more dies per wafer and should have higher yield per die. Standard metrics from fabrication facilities is that as the die shrinks, it gets easier to get higher yield, so there are fewer failures, fewer rejects. So therefore you get not only more units per wafer, but more good units out of those that you create as a percentage. So that's the upside to making a smaller die. It means that depending on what AMD pulls from its other SKUs, whether that's Ryzen or other GPUs, it can make a lot more 6600 XTs as GPU silicon than it can of, say, a 6800 XT, but we'll see how that pans out. $380 was a sticker shock for basically everyone when it was announced, and if you look at our comments from the announcement video of the 6600 XT, that should become apparent. We'll show a few of them. We're gonna keep this really simple for all of you because we don't need to waste everyone's time to get to the conclusion for this today. So in the news video, with the 6600 XT, having only the information of AMD's at the time, first-party information, where they said we expect to be about 15% better than a 3060, and we're also going to be 15% more expensive in MSRP. So it's $330 versus $380 with the 3060 Ti, $20 above that. With that information alone, in the news video, we said if they're 15% better and they're 15% more expensive, that's a 1-to-1 scale in terms of value. So our conclusion of the 66 XT will probably be the same as our conclusion for the 3060, and probably very similar to our conclusion for the 3060 Ti. At best, our conclusion for both of those was, well, we'll recap it for you. The price to performance increase is simply not exciting enough to, in any other generation, make a strong recommendation for this card. It's fine. It does well overall, but it's not exciting. And in this market, that's all you need to sell. All you need is it's fine. In some of these games, we're seeing a 1% dollar increase for a 1% performance increase, which is not progress. It's stagnation. And so that's why we're meh on it.
Thanks, Steve.
In other words, at best, the conclusion was meh. You'll buy it if you need one, because at this point, NVIDIA knew people would buy anything. And the 6600 XT, as you'll see in the benchmarks today, is not bad in the sense of being objectively bad. It's not like the product is exploding. No one's made anything like that before. By the way, that's from our Gigabyte power supply research piece. Check it out on the channel. And you can still use code SENDHELP for 10% off on store.gamersnexus.net if you'd like to support that type and this type of testing, where you can get mod mats, mouse mats, and other items, everything on the store for 10% off with that code right now. So anyway, the product isn't necessarily bad, but the value is suspect. And the market means that the value being suspect is somewhat irrelevant because all of them will sell, and the companies know that. So if our conclusion was ranging from meh to stagnation with the 3060 series, the Ti and the non-Ti, then it is the same for this, because we're seeing still about a 1% price to 1% performance linear bump on the scale for the card. And 1% for 1%, especially if you start looking at something like a 5600 XT, which is far more value oriented at $100 cheaper than this, that is not progress, that's not advancement, that's stagnation. Because comparing to a card from 2 years ago, where you're looking at a 1-to-1 uplift price to performance, with new architecture, it's not moving. It has stayed the same. but the price has increased. And the performance gets dragged up marginally with that to make it feel like it's an advancement. Now, we're gonna get into the benchmarks at this point. One final thing before we get into it to really make sure everyone understands how we approach reviews for products. There are a lot of ways to potentially justify the price increase here. We know that the memory prices have gone up. We know that materials prices have gone up, that logistics are a nightmare right now. Doesn't change the fact that when the other cards that are on the market do hit the market, and yes, we know they are difficult to get, but people are able to buy them. It's just a matter of who it is and how many. But when they hit the market, so when there's a 6700 XT restock, or maybe more appropriately, when there's a 3060 or a 3060 Ti restock, it will be pretty close to the original MSRP despite all of these issues. And that's really what matters here. It's what else can you get? Or if you're looking at an upgrade, what's sort of the price to performance versus your existing card? Can you strain it along a little bit longer and make your 10 or 9 or RX 500 series live for maybe another 6 months to a year to see what happens at that point in the market? And of course, if you can, because you're relatively happy with your performance of your system, it's not slowing you down in a big way, then probably keep doing that. Stick with what you have, because it's just better for you. It's less waste and it's less wasted money. But the point is that we're getting to, we have one main approach when we do reviews and news. And our approach is entirely consumer focused. I don't care what the excuses are for AMD or NVIDIA or Intel for why their prices are what they are. It doesn't matter to us strictly if the memory prices, capacitor prices, whatever has gone up. Now, obviously we consider that and we consider the company's viewpoint, but ultimately, if in spite of all of these considerations, the product is still bad value for the consumer, that's what we're gonna say, because that's what we care about. Doesn't matter to me if a company worth, like say Intel, hundreds of billions of dollars, has an excuse for why its product is priced the way it is, because if it's still bad value, it's bad value, and that hurts the consumer from your perspective, from a buyer's perspective, a lot more than it hurts the company's perspective for me to say that. So, although there may be reasonable excuses for $380 the floor for this product, which will inevitably be sold for far higher by partners before even scalpers, because they're gonna have partner models that are more expensive, although it's maybe a reasonable excuse, that doesn't change the fact that the value is kind of brutal where it is right now compared to previous generations, and the fact that previously launched cards in this generation have a better, in most instances, value position than this one does, even in spite of materials costs, because you can still get them towards MSRP if you happen to snipe one when it restocks. And that largely depends on your region. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into the benchmarks and talk through the card, how it performs, if it's worth it. You probably know the answer at this point. And just as a reminder, it's not objectively bad. It's just we're trying to watch out for you in terms of the value of all of these products right now. That's NVIDIA too. We'll start off with some quick card level performance. Looking at GPU thermals on the PowerColor Fighter under a sustained gaming workload and with auto controls, the card holds a VBIOS temperature target of about 73 degrees Celsius. This has the hotspot at 87 to 89 degrees Celsius, so the edge temperature is completely fine at 73. It's in a good spot, while the hotspot temperature is technically fine. It's okay. We'd like to see the hotspot to edge delta closer to a gap of just 10 degrees between them, rather than upwards of 16 degrees apart. This to us indicates a mounting pressure inconsistency. If people cared enough about individual partner model reviews these days, we would do the pressure testing and explore it. We could prove all of this, but the time investment balloons, and we've done that recently, and unfortunately the interest is sadly not supported by the current supply of cards. So suffice to say, this should be about 6 degrees better on the delta to align with what we typically see on good designs. The fan ramp is all kinds of out of whack on the PowerColor Fighter. This isn't new for PowerColor. The company has a lot of problems with fan hysteresis and has had problems with ramp in the past, so it's no surprise to see it again here. At the outset of the load, the card hard ramps to 1900 RPM, while the GPU temperature is still in the 50s. It's going full freak out panic mode over, at this point, not much. It then realizes that it's gone too far and drops to 1430 RPM, despite the fact that the temperature is only increasing at this point and the load is only ramping. It's not dying down. Then the card, or the VBIOS, realizes that, oops, the fan still needs to be doing stuff, and so it ramps again to 1800 RPM. This kind of erratic behavior creates audible, noticeable change in pitch and tone coming from the computer, and so the user will hear it. PowerColor needs to revamp its fan curve and VBIOS to help smooth this out. There needs to be a bit more lag at the kickoff and then it needs to ramp more gradually. Overclocking the RX 6600 XT wasn't too bad. We've gotten more familiar with the process as AMD's GPUs have continued to roll out. This chart shows our raw test notes as we worked through finding stable settings, with a port royal score used to help validate the OC. With all GPUs, it's important to validate the OC settings with scores after each change. Thanks to silent error correction, it's easy to get a higher number on an OC that actually hurts the real-world performance. We ended up settling at 2700 to 2800 for the core clock in AMD software and 200 MHz offset on the memory. AMD's actually increased the memory offset allowance, so now there's room to try and find good memory bins even beyond this. We tried undervolting all the way down to 1100 millivolts, and although it didn't crash, the frequency was regressing each time we stepped below 1130 millivolts. With higher settings, 1130 was the best that we got, with a maximum score increase on a stable OC in all of the games of 7.1%, at least by port royal score. That's not bad. It's not exciting, but at least it's not a total waste of time like some of the 2% uplifts often are. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p has the RX 6600 XT Fighter at 135 FPS average, with lows at 115 and 109. We'll quickly run through some stats here. The 6600 XT OC and undervolt improved results by 2.7% to 139 FPS average, so it is kind of a waste of time in this one. The RTX 3060 non-TI ran at 123 FPS average, allowing the 6600 XT a lead of 10.3% in exchange for 15% more money. We said the RTX 3060 was unexciting for being about 10% more money for about 11% more performance than the RTX 2060 KO at launch. In other words, it was complete and utter stagnation. That's true here too. The 6600 XT is improving over its direct competition, slower than its price is increasing. As for the others, the 3060 Ti outdoes the 6600 XT by 19% for 5% more MSRP, versus older cards upgrading from a 1060 6GB would give you over 2 times more performance on the 6600 XT, as would the RX 580 to 6600 XT upgrade. The 66 XT isn't bad, it's just not good value. At 1440p, the 66 XT is still a capable performer. It's running about 92 FPS average stock, or 95 FPS overclocked. That has it near the 5700 XT. You could play games at 1440p on this device as expected, despite the heavier marketing focus on 1080p high refresh. The RTX 2060 KO would have been better value at 74 FPS average for $300 when it launched, and lower later, but it's hard to find those cards now. Versus the 3060, the 66 XT offers 9% more performance for 15% more money. The lead slips as resolution increases, thanks to NVIDIA's advantages at higher resolution. The 3060 Ti now holds a lead of 22% instead of 19%. The 66 XT leads the RX 580 and the GTX 1060 by upwards of 120%. At 4K, the RX 6600 XT held about 49 FPS average, with the OC offering 5% more performance. It's actually not bad. You could play 4K in some games on this card if the graphic settings were tuned down a little bit. The 3060 Ti ends up 33% ahead for now 5% more MSRP for whatever that's worth, and the 3060 ends up roughly tying the 6600 XT. NVIDIA remains somewhat competitive at the higher resolutions, while AMD remains somewhat competitive at the lower resolutions. In Three Kingdoms at 1080p, the 6600 XT ran at 72 FPS average with our more abusive graphic settings. That has about equal with the 3060 and allows the 3060 Ti a lead of 35%. So far, the 6600 XT is making the 3060 Ti look like good value, despite the fact that the 3060 Ti was ultimately meh value at launch. It's a technical term when compared to other generations previously. Versus those previous generations, the 6600 XT outdoes the 5600 XT by about 19%, while the price crept up by about 36% generationally. And AMD's previous gen was better value. Again, an RX 580 or a GTX 900 series or a 10 series card would get more meaningful uplift from this jaunt, but that doesn't change the value proposition. At 1440p, the RX 6600 XT drops to 44 FPS average. That's expected in this title since we run the graphics at Ultra. You'd still be able to support 60 FPS 1440 if dropping settings for this one, but we test for relative scaling more than anything. The 6600 XT maintains better low proportions here than the NVIDIA cards are doing, which is behavior we've seen regularly from this series of games. The 6600 XT is 19% ahead of the 5600 XT. The 3060 is about equal to the 6600 XT, but with worse lows. And the 6600 XT OC improved by 6%, landing on par with the 5700 XT. At 4K, the 6600 XT is unplayable, but still useful for scaling data. The 3060 now technically pulls ahead in average, although not meaningfully, and the 3060 Ti gaps up. Overall, though, it's a wash between all of these, so we'll move on. Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1080p has the 6600 XT at 105 FPS average with good lows. It leads the 3060 by 16%, the 2060 by 34%, and the RX 580 by 90%. It also leads the 10 and 900 series by what is known to scientists as a lot of percent. The 3060 Ti leads by 12% here, not as impressive as in some other titles, although it's still technically ahead. At 1440p, the 6600 XT ended up at 77 FPS to 81, depending on the clocks. That has it about 10% ahead of the 3060, so we're not really seeing AMD's 15% claims thus far, and it also has the 3060 Ti about 21% ahead here. Time to look at one of those high refresh titles that AMD was talking about. In Rainbow Six Siege at 1080p, the RX 6600 XT ran at 321 FPS average, with the OC improving 4.3%. The 3060 Ti maintains a lead of just 12% here, with the 3060 being led by the 6600 XT by 15%. There's that AMD marketing number, finally. It's in a more esports-focused title that we see AMD's claims of 15% being realized. This at least aligns with the focus, though, of 1080p high refresh esports style titles. At 1440p, the RX 6600 XT remains capable and runs at 188 FPS average, up to 200 with the overclock. The 3060 Ti pulls ahead, now with a 31% lead instead of the previous 12% lead, and the 3060 approaches parity, now allowing the 6600 XT a 3.9% lead. At 4K, the 6600 XT is still in playable territory. We've dropped below the truly high refresh range, but at 82 FPS average, it's still doing well for this class of card. Unfortunately, the RTX 2060 KO is right behind it, noticeably behind at 79 FPS average, despite the 27% higher price on the 6600 XT. We've established a pattern at this point, so it's time to get through this faster. You can pause if you care. In the Division 2 at 1080p, the RX 6600 XT holds at about 150 FPS average stock, or 7% higher with the OC. The 6600 XT ends up just behind the 5700 XT and just ahead of the 3060, leading the latter by 7.7%. The 3060 Ti flanks the 6600 XT with a 27% lead. At 1440p, the 6600 XT ran at 96 FPS average, so again, it's a capable 1440p performer, and it remains predictably flanked by the NVIDIA 3060 class cards. In Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p with our test environment, the 6600 XT managed about 77 FPS average stock, or 85 overclocked. That's actually a big gain of 10%, far better than we saw anywhere else. It's not bad actually for an OC, and would be worth it. The 3060 ends up just ahead of the 6600 XT, but they're basically tied, with the 3060 Ti ahead of the stock 66 XT by about 32%. We'll next look at some games with ray tracing features enabled. We'll keep this section very short. We'll likely add more in our GPU methods overhaul for next generation, but right now we're just going to look at the two opposites, which would be Tomb Raider and then Minecraft. Tomb Raider starts us off. This one is more rasterization heavy than RT heavy. It just has shadows for RT. So AMD will do better here than it will do in RT heavy titles. We get emails about this particular thing every time, so to be extremely clear, this is a different test than the earlier Tomb Raider test. RT is on for this one, but it was off before, and that's why the numbers are different. It's the point of it. The 6600 XT managed 68 FPS average here, allowing the 3060 a lead of 12%. That's flipped from before, and the 3060 Ti is now 43% ahead, which is a major lead versus the 66 XT, and this is in a title where, by RT standards, AMD is in a far better position. NVIDIA is still the leader for RT performance overall. At 1440p, the 6600 XT ran at 46 FPS average, allowing NVIDIA a 12% lead on the 3060, or 44% on the 3060 Ti. The 2060 is also embarrassingly close to the 6600 XT. That's embarrassingly for AMD's here, not NVIDIA's. In Minecraft with full ray tracing, the 6600 XT ends up at 27 FPS average at 1080p with no DLSS or FSR equivalent in this game. And this allows the 3060 Ti a significant lead even with DLSS off. AMD struggles here. For power consumption, the RX 6600 XT ended up pulling about 155 watts stock, or 188 when overclocked with the 20% power offset allowed by this card. That has it below the RTX 3060 and therefore more efficient in performance, except ray tracing, when both are stock, and also below the 3060 Ti with a reduction of 23% power consumption, although the performance is also lower. Okay, some quick recaps from the benchmarks. You should have just watched them, they're pretty short this time. We kept it all short for a reason. We know what the interest level is right now for GPUs, and we know that people are basically going to buy it regardless of what reviewers say. But we put enough out there for you to make a conclusion how it performs. Hopefully that helps you in an objective sense. However, we are limiting the amount of extra work we're doing on this one because it just, frankly, people just don't care enough. So that's the way it is right now, but hopefully we'll get back to pressure testing, noise testing, all that stuff in the future. So for now, value. To put this in perspective, the RTX 2060 achieves in one of these games 80% of the performance at 79% of the price. Ideally, we would want to see a break of rank there, so it's not one-to-one increase in price and performance. You want to see the price increase at a shallower curve as the performance increases, because that illustrates improvement rather than stagnation, because you could have gotten that 2 years ago at the same curve that it's at now. So that's the main problem we had with it. Versus previous generations, again, the 66 XT in some instances is outdoing the 5600 XT depending on the game by, say, around 20%, 19% one of the games we looked at. While price crept up 36% MSRP to MSRP, again, comparing Total War for that one. So that's not great. You don't, generationally, it really shouldn't be going that direction. Some of the argument, again, can be stemmed by materials cost and logistics, but we review products based on whether they're worth it for the consumer. And in this instance, the only reason it's really worth it is the same reason the 3060 and the 3060 Ti are worth it, which is it's cheap-ish compared to the 3080 and the 6800 XT. What else are you going to buy? So our recommendation is this. We take a very, I think, down-to-earth approach to it, which is that if you have a system you're happy with today, then, and you can't explicitly pinpoint why you might want to upgrade, if you're only considering upgrading because new stuff is coming out, as we always say, probably stick with what you have. If you can explicitly pinpoint why you'd want to upgrade, so you're unhappy with it, you use your computer for work and it's slowing you down and therefore costing you money, or you use it for fun and it's no longer fun because it's not fast enough and it is costing you time, it's costing you the enjoyment of your time that you would like to spend on something as a hobby, gaming, then it is time to upgrade. But what you upgrade to, in this market, you can take a little bit of time and think about it, because it's just everything sells out very quickly. So whether you're quick on the draw or not, the only time that matters is the instant it stocks on the site. And if you miss that instant, then it seems like the restocking intervals are difficult to predict unless you're a bot. So at that point, might as well take some time and think about it. Maybe I should look at eBay or whatever and look at alternative options. Ultimately, you're getting taken for a ride if you buy this at $380 or more. This is a joke. It is insulting that NVIDIA and AMD are selling things for this much, because, and before anyone tries to buy into this supply increase in costs angle, which is somewhat true, if you look at the earnings reports of these public companies, their margins have gone up. How does that happen? Well, it's because they're making more money per product. So again, our perspective is consumer focused. We don't care about whatever bullshit the companies want to say to justify their price, because ultimately, when I look at the public earnings reports, I see they're making insane money. AMD is up 100% year over year. Their margin is up. NVIDIA's margin is up. That doesn't happen by accident. It's not bad for them to make more money. And our view of it is, if you can avoid buying this card today, then avoid it. If you can keep using what you have, keep using it. Enjoy it, do what you can to make it last longer. That's great for the environment anyway, and it's great for your wallet. So it works whether or not you care about one or the other. But, so the card, the 6600 XT, it's fine. It's not bad, and the same is true for the 3060 and the Ti. It's just that we're not excited about it. We have lost all enthusiasm for this class of cards. We really want to see lower end stuff. We understand that the company's argument, of course, ASP is high, average selling price is high, people buy everything. Why would we make cheaper stuff when we can satisfy shareholders by maintaining high ASP, saying, look at all this growth year over year at our ASP, it's so much higher per unit that we sell. But it's just, we can't get excited about it because we've seen the market for over a decade at this point, and this isn't the market that I like to see, and that makes it hard for me to really endorse any of these products in any way, other than to say, if you need it, we don't absolutely hate it. And the Fighter card, at MSRP, it seems to do okay. It's got some problems with the fan curve, otherwise it's all right. That's the best I can say about it, is that it's all right. But the value is not where we want it to be. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, subscribe for more. You go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly. If you'd like to buy a mouse mat, mod mat, or other item on the store, and you can use code SENDHELP for the next few days for 10% off. That was to help support our gigabyte power supply testing efforts, which you can see on the channel. Otherwise, go to patreon.com/gamersnexus for behind-the-scenes videos. We'll see you all next time.